Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Amiri blinked away the remnants of sleep, his dark eyes adjusting to the light. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles from another night of restless slumber. As he swung his legs over the side of the bed, his gaze fell upon the closet door. It stood slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of what lay hidden within. Amiri's heart quickened, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through his veins. Today was the day. He'd been planning this moment for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity. With no meetings scheduled and a light workload, he could finally indulge in his secret desire. Padding across the room, Amiri reached for the closet handle. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled it open, revealing the treasure trove concealed behind his everyday attire. Nestled between crisp dress shirts and pressed slacks hung a single garment that made his breath catch in his throat. The dress was a deep burgundy, its fabric soft and inviting. Amiri ran his fingers along the smooth material, savoring the sensation against his skin. He'd purchased it months ago during a moment of boldness, but it had remained unworn, a silent reminder of the life he longed to live. Taking a deep breath, Amiri carefully removed the dress from its hanger. The weight of it in his hands felt both foreign and familiar, like a long-lost friend finally returned. He closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment to imagine how it would feel to wear it, to embrace the part of himself he'd kept hidden for so long. With trembling hands, Amiri slipped the dress over his head. The fabric whispered against his skin as it settled into place, hugging his body in all the right ways. He smoothed out the wrinkles, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. Turning to face the full-length mirror on the back of the closet door, Amiri's breath caught in his throat. The person staring back at him was both familiar and strange, a perfect blend of who he was and who he longed to be. The dress accentuated curves he didn't know he had, softening the angles of his body and creating an illusion of femininity that made his heart soar. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he twirled, watching the skirt flare out around him. For the first time in years, Amiri felt truly alive, truly himself. The weight of his secret, of years of repression and denial, seemed to lift from his shoulders.
"This is me,"
he whispered to his reflection, his voice barely audible.
"This is who I've always been."
The sound of his own voice startled him, breaking the spell of the moment. Amiri glanced at the clock on his bedside table, realizing he'd spent far longer than intended lost in his reflection. With a sigh, he turned away from the mirror, ready to face the day ahead. As he settled into his home office, Amiri couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. The soft fabric of the dress against his skin was a constant reminder of his daring choice. He powered up his computer, diving into his work with renewed energy. The morning passed in a blur of productivity. Amiri found himself more focused than ever, the simple act of wearing the dress providing a sense of freedom he'd never experienced before. He tackled project after project, barely noticing as the hours ticked by. It wasn't until his stomach growled, reminding him of the need for lunch, that Amiri finally looked up from his screen. He stretched, reveling in the feeling of the dress moving with him. A glance at the clock showed it was well past noon. Just as he was about to stand and head to the kitchen, a notification popped up on his computer screen. Amiri's blood ran cold as he read the message.
Emergency team meeting in 5 minutes. All hands on deck.
Panic seized him, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it could be heard through the walls. How could he have forgotten? The quarterly review meeting had been rescheduled, pushed up due to a client emergency. And here he was, sitting at his desk in a dress, completely unprepared. Amiri's mind raced, considering his options. He could claim a sudden illness, but that would only delay the inevitable. There wasn't enough time to change and still make it to the meeting. The thought of missing such an important call was unthinkable. His job could be on the line. With shaking hands, Amiri clicked the link to join the video call. As the loading screen appeared, he took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Maybe, just maybe, he could position the camera in a way that wouldn't reveal his attire. The familiar faces of his colleagues began to populate the screen. Amiri's finger hovered over the camera button, his pulse thundering in his ears. At the last possible second, he clicked it, his image appearing alongside the others.
Ah, there you are.
His boss's voice boomed through the speakers.
We were beginning to worry.
Amiri forced a smile, hoping his nervousness wasn't visible.
Sorry for the delay. Technical issues.
As the meeting progressed, Amiri found himself hyper-aware of every movement, every shift in his seat. He kept his hands carefully positioned, terrified of revealing even a hint of the dress he wore. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, he began to realize something extraordinary. No one seemed to notice anything amiss. His colleagues engaged with him as they always had, discussing projects and deadlines without a single raised eyebrow or questioning glance. The dress, which had felt so daring and obvious to him, appeared to be completely invisible to those on the other side of the screen. As the meeting drew to a close, Amiri felt a mix of relief and something else. Disappointment? He'd been so afraid of discovery, yet a small part of him had hoped for, what? Acceptance? Understanding? The realization that he'd wanted someone to see the real him, even in this accidental way, was both surprising and overwhelming.
Great work, everyone,
his boss said, wrapping up the call.
Amiri, could you stay on for a moment? I'd like to discuss your latest project.
Panic flared anew in Amiri's chest. Had his boss noticed something after all? Was this the moment when everything would come crashing down? As the other participants left the call, Amiri braced himself for the worst. His boss's face filled the screen, her expression unreadable. I just wanted to say, she began, and Amiri held his breath, that your work on the Henderson account has been exceptional. You seem more focused and creative than ever. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Relief washed over Amiri, so intense he felt lightheaded.
Thank you,
he managed to say, his voice surprisingly steady.
I've been trying a new approach. I'm glad it's paying off.
His boss nodded approvingly.
It certainly is. Keep up the good work, Amiri. We're lucky to have you on the team.
As the call ended and the screen went dark, Amiri sat back in his chair, stunned. The meeting he'd dreaded, the moment he'd been sure would expose his deepest secret, had instead become an affirmation of his worth. And all while wearing the dress that made him feel more like himself than he ever had before. The rest of the afternoon passed in a daze. Amiri moved through his tasks on autopilot, his mind reeling from the events of the day. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his home office, he finally allowed himself to confront the thoughts he'd been pushing aside. Standing up, Amiri walked to the full-length mirror in his bedroom. He stared at his reflection, taking in every detail, The way the dress hugged his body, the softness it brought to his features, the spark of life in his eyes that had been missing for so long.
"This is me,"
he whispered, echoing his words from that morning. But this time, there was no hesitation, no fear in his voice.
"This is who I am."
The realization hit him with the force of a tidal wave. Years of suppressed feelings, of trying to fit into a mold that never quite felt right, came rushing to the surface. Amiri sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through him. He wasn't just a man who liked to wear dresses in secret. This went far beyond fabric and fashion. The truth he'd been running from for so long stood before him, impossible to ignore any longer. I'm transgender, Amiri said aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign on his tongue, yet undeniably right. Tears welled up in his eyes, a mixture of relief and fear and 100 other emotions he couldn't begin to name. As the reality of his admission sank in, Amiri's mind raced with questions. What would this mean for his life? His career? His relationships? The path ahead seemed daunting, filled with unknowns and potential hardships. But for the first time in as long as he could remember, Amiri felt a glimmer of hope. The person he saw in the mirror, the person he'd kept hidden for so long, deserved a chance to live openly and authentically. With shaking hands, Amiri reached for his phone. He opened a new browser tab, hesitating for just a moment before typing, "How to begin transitioning." As he scrolled through the search results, a mix of excitement and trepidation filled him. There was so much to learn, so many decisions to make. But with each article he read, each resource he discovered, Amiri felt a growing sense of certainty. This was the right path. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. As the night wore on, Amiri immersed himself in research. He read personal accounts of other transgender individuals, learning about their journeys and the challenges they faced. He discovered local support groups and online communities where he could connect with others who understood what he was going through. The more he learned, the more Amiri realized how much of his life had been shaped by his unacknowledged identity. The discomfort he'd always felt in traditionally masculine spaces, the jealousy he'd experienced watching women express themselves freely, the constant feeling of being an outsider. It all made sense now. As dawn broke, casting a soft pink glow through his window, Amiri finally set down his phone. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He had taken the first step on a long and challenging journey, but for the first time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, Amiri began to make small changes in his life. He started growing out his hair, experimenting with subtle makeup when he wasn't on video calls. He ordered more feminine clothing, building a wardrobe that felt true to his emerging identity. Each day brought new discoveries and challenges. Amiri found himself constantly questioning long-held assumptions about gender and identity. He grappled with internalized transphobia, working to unlearn years of societal conditioning. One particularly difficult evening, after a frustrating attempt at applying eyeliner left him feeling discouraged, Amiri sat at his computer, staring at a blank document. His cursor blinked steadily, waiting for words that wouldn't come. Taking a deep breath, Amiri began to type. "Dear Mom and Dad, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been struggling with for a long time." The letter poured out of him, years of pent-up emotions finding release on the digital page. Amiri wrote about his childhood, the moments of discomfort and confusion that had never made sense until now. He explained his recent realizations, his fears, and his hopes for the future. As he neared the end of the letter, Amiri paused. There was one more thing he needed to say, one more truth to acknowledge. With trembling fingers, he typed, "I've also chosen a new name for myself. A name that feels right, that feels like me. From now on, I'd like to be called Amelia." Seeing the name written out, Amelia felt a surge of emotion. It was a name she'd been considering for weeks, trying it out in the privacy of her thoughts. Now, seeing it in black and white, it felt official, real. Amelia read through the letter one last time, making small adjustments here and there. When she was satisfied, she saved the document but didn't send it. Not yet. She wasn't quite ready for that step. Instead, Amelia opened her work email. Taking a deep breath, she began composing a message to her boss and HR department. It was time to have a conversation about her transition and how it would affect her work life. The next morning, Amelia woke early, her stomach churning with nervous energy. She'd scheduled a video call with her boss and the head of HR for first thing in the morning. As she got ready, applying light makeup and choosing a blouse that made her feel confident, Amelia tried to calm her racing thoughts. She'd spent hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing what she wanted to say. Yet as the time for the call approached, all her carefully planned words seemed to evaporate. Taking a deep breath, Amelia clicked the link to join the meeting. Her boss and the HR representative appeared on screen, their expressions neutral.
"Good morning, Amiri,"
her boss began.
"You said you had something important to discuss?"
Amelia nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I do. And before we begin, I want to let you know that I've chosen a new name. I'd like to be called Amelia from now on." There was a moment of silence, and Amelia felt her heart pounding in her chest. Then, to her surprise, her boss smiled. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Amelia," she said, emphasizing the name. "I'm guessing this is related to what you wanted to discuss?" Feeling a wave of relief, Amelia nodded. "Yes, it is. I'm transgender. I've recently come to terms with this, and I'm beginning my transition. I wanted to discuss how we can handle this in the workplace." What followed was a conversation unlike any Amelia had ever experienced. Her boss and the HR representative listened attentively as she explained her situation. They asked thoughtful questions about her needs and concerns, offering support and resources she hadn't even considered. By the end of the call, a plan was in place. The company would work with Amelia to ensure a smooth transition at work, including updating her name in all official documents and communicating the change to her colleagues. As the call ended, Amelia sat back in her chair, feeling a mix of exhaustion and elation. She'd done it. She'd taken the first step towards living authentically in all aspects of her life. Over the next few months, Amelia's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Her colleagues, after an initial period of adjustment, embraced her new identity with open arms. She found herself forming deeper connections with her coworkers, no longer held back by the walls she'd built to protect her secret. Outside of work, Amelia began to explore her identity more openly. She joined a local support group for transgender individuals, finding comfort and inspiration in the stories of others who had walked this path before her. One evening, as Amelia was getting ready for a support group meeting, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair had grown longer, framing her face in soft waves. The hormones she'd started taking were beginning to subtly reshape her features, softening the angles of her face. But it was her eyes that captured her attention. They shone with a light she'd never seen before, a spark of life and authenticity that had been missing for so long. Amelia smiled at her reflection, feeling a surge of pride and joy. The journey ahead was still long, with many challenges to face, but for the first time in her life, she was moving forward as her true self. As she grabbed her purse and headed out the door, Amelia felt a sense of excitement for what the future might hold. She was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was Amelia, in all her complexity and beauty, ready to embrace the life she'd always dreamed of living. The sun was setting as Amelia arrived at the community center where her support group met. The warm glow of the fading light seemed to mirror the warmth she felt inside. As she walked through the doors, she was greeted by familiar faces, people who had become friends and confidants over the past few months. "Amelia!" a voice called out. She turned to see Reese, a trans man who had become one of her closest friends in the group. His smile was wide and genuine as he approached.
"You're glowing today. Something good happen?"
Amelia couldn't help but return the smile. "I had my 3-month review at work today," she explained as they found seats. "My boss said I've been more productive and creative than ever. She even hinted at a possible promotion in the near future." Reese's eyes lit up. "That's fantastic! I told you they'd see how amazing you are once you could be your true self." As the meeting began, Amelia listened to others share their experiences, both triumphs and setbacks. When it came her turn to speak, she found herself opening up more than she ever had before. "I never realized how much energy I was expending just trying to be someone I wasn't," she admitted to the group. "Now that I'm living as my true self, it's like I've unlocked a part of me that was always there, just waiting to be set free." The nods of understanding and murmurs of agreement from around the room filled Amelia with a sense of belonging. These people understood her in a way that even her closest friends and family couldn't quite manage. After the meeting, as people were mingling and chatting, Amelia felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Maya, one of the group's newest members, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. "I hope this isn't weird," Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I just wanted to say that you inspire me. Seeing how far you've come, how confident you are, it gives me hope that maybe I can do this too." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. She remembered all too well the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her in the early days of her transition. Without hesitation, she pulled Maya into a gentle hug. "You can do this," Amelia assured her. "It's not always easy, but it's so worth it, and you have all of us here to support you every step of the way." As they parted, Amelia saw tears glistening in Maya's eyes, but there was also a spark of determination there, a glimmer of hope that hadn't been present before. Walking home that evening, Amelia felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey she'd embarked on had not only transformed her own life, but was now helping others find the courage to be true to themselves. The next morning, Amelia woke to find an email from her parents. Her heart raced as she opened it, remembering the letter she'd sent them weeks ago, explaining her transition. The response was not what she'd feared, but it wasn't quite what she'd hoped for either. Her parents expressed love and a desire to understand, but also confusion and concern. They had questions, so many questions, and weren't sure how to process this change. Amelia read the email several times, allowing herself to feel the mix of emotions it evoked. There was relief that they hadn't rejected her outright, but also sadness at the clear struggle they were experiencing. With a deep breath, Amelia began to compose her reply. She answered their questions as honestly and openly as she could, sharing resources that had helped her understand her own identity. She expressed her love for them and her hope that, with time, they could come to fully accept and embrace her as Amelia. As she hit send, Amelia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had taken another step forward, another move towards living her life with complete authenticity. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of changes. At work, Amelia's hinted-at promotion became a reality. She found herself leading a new project, her confidence growing with each successful presentation and innovative idea. In her personal life, Amelia continued to explore and embrace her femininity. She experimented with different styles of clothing, finding joy in expressing herself through fashion in ways she'd never allowed before. She even signed up for a makeup class, laughing at her early attempts at contouring and reveling in the camaraderie of the other students. One Saturday afternoon, as Amelia was trying on outfits for a night out with friends from her support group, her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was from her parents. Taking a deep breath, Amelia answered the call. Her parents' faces appeared on the screen, their expressions a mix of nervousness and love. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother said, her voice wavering slightly. We wanted to see you, to talk face to face." Amelia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so glad you called," she said softly. What followed was a conversation filled with tears, laughter, and more honesty than they'd shared in years. Her parents asked questions, some awkward, some insightful, all coming from a place of love and a genuine desire to understand. As the call neared its end, Amelia's father cleared his throat.
"We want you to know,"
he said, his voice thick with emotion,
"that we love you. Unconditionally. It might take us some time to fully understand everything, but we're here for you, Amelia."
Hearing her father say her name, Amelia felt a surge of love and gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she managed to say through her tears. "That means everything to me." Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!